Hello, my friend. Today I bring you another lost legend from the depths of Middle-earth. Close your eyes, feel the magic surround you. Our journey begins. The boy in the red cloak does not sleep beneath a roof. Each night, he returns to the hollow, even when frost creeps like lichen across the grass, even when the wind tastes of stone. The villagers say nothing. They have learned that speaking of him is like naming a wound. It does not heal, only listens. He eats little, drinks nothing from the basin, but he waits. He is always waiting. No one remembers when he arrived. Some recall the spring melt, others swear it was the last turning of the harvest moon. But the boy was never seen arriving, only found, sitting cross-legged beneath the bowed willows, his cloak soaked with dew, eyes open as though he had not blinked for a century. There is a woman in the village, old as Riverbone and twice as bent. Her name is Elwyn. She remembers more than most, not because she tries, but because forgetting has never worked. Her cottage lies furthest from the well, where fog sleeps in coils beside the fence. She is the only one who speaks to the boy, not often, not with hope, but with reverence, like one might offer to a broken heirloom or a cursed hymn. I asked her once what she sees when she looks at him. Her hands, wrapped in fingerless wool, trembled not from cold, but memory. She said, "The king had 3 sons, one crowned, one buried, one unnamed. Only 2 were mourned." I did not ask again. Some nights she leaves him offerings, a smooth stone, a braid of grass, a folded slip of bark with a word etched into it, a word in no tongue we know. The boy never takes them, but they vanish by morning, as though carried away by something not quite wind. The village has not had a fire festival in years. The wood no longer burns clean, and the songs once sung on the last night of fall now curl in the throat like soot. But the old path to the watchstone is still there, half swallowed by thorns and ash fern. I walked it last dusk, when the air held that breathless stillness, as though the trees were holding something between their leaves. At the summit stands a stone, the height of 3 men, crowned with moss and etched with lines worn smooth by the forgetting. It faces east, toward the valley the king never returned from. In the silence of that place, I could almost hear the wind pulling the name Finwë apart, syllable by syllable, like unraveling thread. There are stories still, buried under the ones that are told too often. I have begun to dream them. In one such dream, I stood within a great hall of shadowed columns, the walls humming with names I did not know. At the center sat a throne of woven roots, and upon it, not a king, but a child, faceless and robed in gold dust. The hall was lit by a single candle, and as I stepped closer, it did not flicker, did not breathe. When I reached out, the child turned, not toward me, but toward a shape behind me. I did not look back. I awoke with dirt beneath my nails. Elwyn told me once that grief, when left too long unspoken, becomes a place, a real place, not metaphor, not dream. She believes the hollow beneath the willows is such a place, a wound that never bled, a cradle never rocked, not haunted, not precisely, but remembered too deeply. The priests don't speak to her. They have their own stories. Their temple bells no longer ring, though no one cut the ropes. The tower stands silent above the village, its stones split by frost, its door forever open. No child has stepped inside since the boy came, and yet each winter, Fresh snow avoids the threshold, as though the building exhales a breath too sacred for frost to touch. There is something fraying in the weave of the village. Children have stopped being born. Crops sprout in wrong shapes. The well water tastes of iron, no matter the season. The crows come too early and stay too late, yet no one leaves. They say it is fear, but I think it is older than that. I think it is loyalty, not to a king, not even to a name, but to something underneath, something buried beneath stone and silence that waits to be forgiven. One evening, as twilight blurred the sky into indigo threads, I sat near the basin where Finwë's tears were said to fall. The boy was already there, not facing me, not seeing me, just drawing, again, that same circle in the dust, as though trying to remember its shape before it was ever learned. But something had changed. This time, the circle was joined by a mark, a single downward line beneath it, like a tether, a root, or a hanging thread. I dared not speak, but my breath caught, and then the wind moved, not around me, but through me, as if I had stepped into memory, not air. And I saw, only for a moment, a great tree with leaves made of stone, branches hanging low with names, each etched in glimmering script. One branch was broken, not fallen, not yet, but split, held together by threads of light, and beneath it, a cradle, empty. When the wind left me, the boy stood. His hands, pale as old bark, fell to his sides. He did not look back. He walked to the base of the watchstone and placed something small upon its roots, a braid of silver hair. By morning, it had vanished. That was 3 nights ago. Since then, the willows have bent lower. The mist has thickened. The birds have stopped singing. The boy remains. So does the silence. And each night, I ask myself, if the first king had held the child, would we have needed to remember this story at all? Or is remembering all that keeps the world from forgetting itself? The wind along the ridges was a slow, unbreaking breath, not cold, not kind, only old. It threaded through the broken ribs of long emptied cottages, brushing the ash sills where herbs no longer grew. There was a song once sung here about moths and mourning, but only the stone remembers the words now, and even then, only in quiet. Beyond the hollow, the hills begin to slope away from the village like forgotten shoulders. There, past a gate that hangs open without hinges, lies a path, known only in the ankles of the elders. They do not speak of it, but their bones avoid it, and so it remains, overgrown, salt-damp, humming with the memory of feet that once walked in pairs, then alone, then not at all. Along that path is a wall, and along that wall is lichen, and within that lichen is something no longer living, but not yet dead. I touched it once as a child, just brushed it with the back of my hand while chasing the sun through bramble and dusk. My skin flinched back, not from pain, but from recognition, a knowing too old for blood to understand. The wall curves, slightly inward, as if holding something in or out, and just past its bend, beneath a knot of elder trees whose roots have long forgotten the sky, stands a shrine. No name, no statue, no offerings, only a sunken shape of stone where something once stood proud and broke itself slowly over centuries. Moss grows there, thick and colorless. It does not drink the light, it remembers it. And just behind the shrine, there is a bell. It hangs from a birch limb now nearly split, and the rope is no longer rope, only a trail of withered vine. But the bell remains, greened and spotted, its mouth open like a question too sacred to echo. I have never heard it ring, not truly, Only once, long ago, in a dream where the sky was made of feathers and the ground refused to hold my weight. The sound was not a chime. It was a breath being returned to its owner. There is no road that leads here, only memory, and even that is fading. The boy has not moved from the hollow, but the willows have. Their roots now reach closer to one another, as if huddling in grief or guilt, or both. Their branches drag the ground like veils soaked in unwept tears. I passed them yesterday, and I swear I heard something beneath the soil. Not a voice, a presence. Like something too tired to rise, but not tired enough to forget. Elwyn has not spoken for 3 days. She lights her candles, yes, and leaves her offerings. Twigs tied in threes, feathers bent backward, stones with no corners. But her voice has gone the way of the bells. She nods when spoken to, smiles sometimes, but it is the smile of someone who knows what it means to be remembered in the wrong way. The boy watches her now, not always, not with cruelty, but with the gaze of someone who was never named and is trying to learn what names are for. Each morning, he walks the exact same circle, not the one in the dirt, but one made with his feet. Around the hollow, around the gate, around the basin, never touching anything. His cloak trails behind him like breath turned to fabric, and where he steps, the grass remains bowed for hours after. I once followed him, far enough to see what he avoids. He does not go near the shrine. When he nears it, he turns his head gently, like one listening to a lullaby they were never sung. And then he moves on, not quickly, just surely. He is waiting, we all know, but not for us. And as he waits, the land remembers. There are stones that have begun to surface from the ground, smooth, thumb-shaped, aligned in no pattern but grief. They were not there last season. Some say they were buried long ago, markers for oaths that broke their speakers. Others say the earth is speaking back, wordlessly, patiently. I sat among them once, just before the sun dipped low enough to soften the teeth of shadow. The air was heavy with a hush of birds holding their breath. And I remembered something my mother once said, in a voice too soft to stay. Not all graves are dug for the dead. Some are prepared for the forgotten. The longer I stayed among those stones, the more I felt watched, not by eyes, but by attention, like the world was slowly blinking around me. And when I stood, the moss beneath my hand left a print upon my palm, not green, not wet, just cold. Since that day, my dreams have changed. I no longer see the faceless child or the throne of roots. Now I walk hallways built of wind and light, where walls hum with breath and ceilings drip with time. At the center of these dreams, always the same thing, a cradle made of water, with nothing inside but a ring of pale hair and a name carved into ice, a name that melts before I can read it. I have tried not to speak of these things aloud. The others would not understand. But sometimes, I think the boy knows. Sometimes, when I pass the hollow, I find a braid of rushes folded beneath a stone, or a ring of salt encircling the base of a willow. These are old signs, not warnings, invitations, or farewells, perhaps both. And yesterday, as the fog rolled down like lace unraveling from the high cliffs, I heard the bell, just once, not loud, not sharp, a sound like a thread snapping gently beneath the weight of something too old to hold. No one else heard it, but the boy turned his head. He looked toward the shrine, and then he closed his eyes. I do not know what that means, but the lichen has begun to bloom on the inside of the village doors. The elders have stopped lighting their hearths, and the birds now sing at dusk instead of dawn. Songs with no tune, no rhythm, only sorrow. The world is tilting, and still, no one dares speak the boy's name, because we do not know it, because perhaps there never was one, and because names, once spoken, cannot be unspoken, only buried beneath stone and wind and centuries of silence too deep to wake. The trees beyond the northern rise have begun to lean inward, not all at once, nor all in one direction, but enough that their branches now tangle like fingers, praying in a language the earth no longer understands. They have not fallen, only bowed, as if listening to something beneath them, or grieving it. Once, long ago, that slope was called the Mourner's Fold. It is not marked on any map, nor does anyone claim it now. But the soil there grows softer each year, as if the ground is remembering what it once meant to hold the weight of something that could not be carried. Even the birds pass it over, tracing wide arcs above, never landing. I went there yesterday, not with intent. The way one does not plan to remember a dream only finds it waiting, but with feet drawn as if by scent or gravity. The grass whispered under my steps, though there was no wind, and as I crossed the edge where the trees had grown too quiet, I felt the hush settle over me like a shroud. Not dread, not warning, just welcome, or perhaps recognition. There were no paths, only roots and memory. The canopy had grown thick, and the light that filtered through moved slowly, like dust through stained glass. At the center of the grove, I found a stone, flat, wide, weathered, resting as though it had not been placed but revealed. Lichen crawled across its face in lines too deliberate to be accidental. A pattern, maybe, or a name, but I did not touch it. There are things that can be known only once. I sat beside it and listened, not to the air, which had no sound, nor to the trees, which held their breath, but to the silence beneath those things, the silence that lives in stone, in the folds of bark, in the space between the closing of eyes and the first tear. And I remembered a voice, not mine, not now, saying, "Even the forgotten leave fingerprints." When I returned to the village, it was dusk, and the sky wore the color of soot washed from an old altar. Smoke curled from fewer chimneys now. Some homes were already shuttered, doors barred not in fear, but in fatigue, the kind of tired that seeps in when the sun forgets how to rise correctly. The boy had not moved. His circle had widened though. Instead of one, there were now three, concentric, careful, each traced with small white stones. Inside the smallest, he sat, eyes closed, hands folded. Around him the grass had yellowed, not from fire nor drought, just time, or something older than time, pressing gently downward. Elwyn passed by with her hands full of twine and river reeds. She did not look at him, but she placed something at the base of the willow nearest him, a length of cloth wrapped around a shard of bone, tied in a knot used only for vows. I watched her lips move. No sound, only breath. The boy did not stir, but the wind shifted, and I thought for a moment I heard something beneath it. Not a voice, not even a word, a weight, a remembering. That night, I dreamt of hands, not touching, not reaching, just resting. Dozens of them, stone-colored and still, resting upon a great slab of ice. Each hand pointed outward, as though pushing something in. And at the center, a small cradle of ash, empty. I woke before dawn. My mouth tasted of old copper, and my palms were dusted with earth I had not touched. The basin outside the village no longer holds water. The surface has grown cloudy, like breath against a mirror that never clears. Someone, not I, has placed candles around its edge. 12. Unlit, unmelted. Their wicks twist toward the sky like questions that have waited too long for answers. The villagers say nothing of them, nor of the moss that has begun to crawl along the eastern walls. It is pale now, almost white, and clings in spirals that resemble writing too ancient to read. The younger ones ask if it is a sign. The elders reply only with silence or stories about footsteps heard in the fields at night, footsteps that leave no prints but erase others, and through it all the boy remains. Sometimes I wonder if he is the ghost, or if we are. He does not grow older, though seasons shift around him. His cloak remains red, though no dye in the village holds such color anymore. He does not speak, but each day his circles widen, and the center holds. This morning, I found a ring of dried leaves on my doorstep, each leaf carved with a single line. 12 leaves, 12 lines, no pattern, no name, only the sound of something being prepared. I left them there, not out of fear, but because some gifts are not meant to be unwrapped. And now, as twilight leans heavy against the edge of the world, I write these words by the light of a candle that will not last the night. My ink is thin, my hand unsteady, but still, I write, because if I stop, I will hear the bell again, the one no one else hears, the one that does not ring but waits, suspended in the breath between this moment and the next. A waiting made of stone, of names, of children whose footsteps were never meant to echo. And the trees, they lean closer now. They do not creak, they do not break, they only bend toward the boy in the red cloak and the 3 circles that grow each day, as if measuring the distance between forgetting and forgiveness, between silence and sound, between the cradle and the grave. The fog has learned to arrive before the morning. It does not creep now, nor gather. It simply is, resting low across the earth like breath held too long. The village does not stir beneath it. There are no bells, no doors drawn open, no pails set upon worn thresholds. Even the animals, what few remain, move softly, as if they too have learned to listen before living. In this hush, the stone speaks best. Along the old footpath leading to the collapsed granary, there are pebbles that shift without touch, only slightly, only inward, as if the earth itself draws them closer into some forgotten shape or pattern or prayer no longer recited aloud. I followed the path at first light, though the sun never broke the mist. I could not see far, but I did not need to. The way was not in sight, but in memory. The slope of the soil, the bend of air. It guided without asking. The granary is little more than a pile of slumped wood and rotted beam, a wound softened by moss and time. But behind it, just where the earth begins to dip, lies something older. A stone stair, half swallowed by root and silence. The steps don't descend, not exactly. They fade, like memory under grief, each stone worn, down in the middle, as though once walked by bare feet, too often, too long ago. I did not walk them, I only knelt. Something about the air here bends light, not cruelly, not wrong, simply different, as though grief has thickened it, made it heavy, gold-laced, and still. I watched the stairs until I could no longer tell if they went down or up. Then I stood and left, slowly. The boy had moved, not far, still within the hollow, still inside his widening circles, but now nearer to the oldest willow, the one with the bark split down its center like a mouth sewn shut. He stood beside it, hand gently resting on its flank. His eyes were not closed, nor were they open in the usual way. They looked inward, like someone hearing the echo of their own name in a room without walls. Beneath him, the grass had withered further, curling like old vellum, and around him, new stones had appeared, not laid by hand, not carried, just there, pale, smooth, warm despite the fog. One bore a mark, a spiral turning inward until it vanished. I did not touch it. Elwyn watched from her window, face half lit by a candle that had not burned since her sister's death many winters ago. She did not speak, only turned her head, not toward the boy, but toward the hill beyond the shrine, where the snow never settles and the light bends the other way. There is something rising, not fast, not violent, like sleep returning to a long withered limb. The villagers feel it, though they do not name it. They walk more slowly. They speak less often. Children no longer play near the well. Even the weaver has begun knotting her threads with loops meant for mourning cloth. She says it is a habit, but her hands do not lie. The basin, too, has changed. Where once the water stood still and blank, it now shimmers faintly, not like light, but like breath on glass. Here, then not. A figure has been carved into its rim, faint, barely seen. A child curled inward, arms around its knees, no face, no hands, only the suggestion of waiting. I asked the priest if he knew of it. He said nothing, but placed his palm against the stone and did not move for a long time. When he finally withdrew, his fingertips bled, only a little, only enough to leave 5 small dots, like stars out of order. The next day, the boy drew 5 more circles in the dust, smaller, each one holding a single dried petal. No flowers grow this season. That evening, as the last light folded itself into the soil, I heard singing. Not song, precisely, just tone. A low-drawn hum, like wind pushed through hollow bone. It came from the grove, from the direction of the mourner's fold. I walked out, despite the chill, despite the warnings etched into every wrinkle of the elders' faces. And I saw her, a woman seated among the roots of the leaning trees, hair the color of paper held near flame, eyes shut, mouth barely parted. Her hands cupped a bowl of clay, and within it, light. Not fire, not flame, just light, the color of old honey and grief. She did not see me, but the trees did. They bent lower, their bark groaning not with age, but effort, as though protecting or honoring or remembering. The hum grew louder, then softer, then vanished altogether. And when it was gone, the woman was too. Only the bowl remained, empty. By morning, the fog had crept closer to the village. It now presses against the windows like breath from a forgotten mouth. The children say they hear laughter in it, like bells that have been underwater too long. No one corrects them. No one opens their doors at dawn. Even the animals have begun to dig. Not for shelter, for something else. Small hollows appear in the soft earth near the shrine, paw-scooped, orderly, circular, each one surrounded by a ring of feathers. Always 7, always black. The priest says the number means nothing, but his voice breaks now when he blesses the bread. I found a note on my windowsill today. No ink, just indentations, pressed deep into bark-thin parchment. I held it to the candlelight until the words revealed themselves. We are not the first to forget what we loved, only the most forgiven. There was no name, but in the hollow, the boy had begun weaving. Lengths of thin reed, split and knotted into a pattern I could not decipher. Not beautiful, not crude, just exact, as if copying something already known, already memorized. The pattern stretched between two stones, held taut by pins carved from bone. And in its center, something swayed gently, a single hair, white, impossibly long. He watched it as one might watch smoke, knowing it will vanish, but not when. The willows bent further that night, and the moon, when it rose, looked wrong, too close, too still, too full of things unsaid. And though no one dared speak aloud, we all knew. Something buried has begun to remember the weight of its name. The frost has begun to linger past sunrise. It clings not only to the grass, but to the corners of doors, the folds of cloth left out overnight, and even the eyelids of those who rise too early. It does not melt so much as sink, absorbed into wood, into wool, into thought. Some say it is colder now than it should be, but no one builds larger fires. There is a hush in the air that dissuades even warmth. Last night, I dreamt of the well. It was no longer dry. The water had risen, not with force, but like breath held too long finally returning. The surface was perfectly flat, dark as polished stone, reflecting nothing. Around it stood figures with their backs turned, too still to be living, too warm to be statues. One of them bent forward gently and dropped a coin into the well. But there was no sound, not even the suggestion of depth. When I woke, my hands were damp with cold. I walked to the well after dawn, before the frost had finished nesting in the stone. There were no figures, but the bucket had been drawn halfway up and left to hang. Water glistened at its edge, and on the lip of the Saar well, a single coin rested, smooth, dull, its face worn blank by age. It was warm to the touch. I left it there. The boy was already in the hollow. He had begun arranging the stones again, not in circles this time, but in long, weaving lines, as if mimicking the shape of roots beneath the earth. Each stone bore a mark now, some etched, some merely scratched, none familiar. They resembled the kinds of symbols a tree might remember in its rings, too slow for language, too old for speech. A new object hung between the willows, thin cloth, darkened by dew, tied at the corners like a banner, but there was no wind to lift it. It hung still. At first I thought it was empty, but as the light shifted, I saw the impression of something inside, a shape not drawn but present, like a pressed leaf between pages, faint, curled inward, like a figure in sleep or sorrow. Elwyn stood at the far end of the path, hands clasped, a small bundle tucked beneath one arm. She did not move closer, only watched. The boy did not turn. The mist has changed. It does not roll now. It gathers, in corners, in the hollows of trees, at the edge of mirrors. It has begun to hum, faintly, not always, not for everyone, but often enough that the weaver has stuffed cloth into the cracks of her shutters, and the baker now speaks only in whispers. Even the dogs no longer bark. They listen, heads tilted slightly, ears low, as if trying to recall something they were never taught. I found a string tied around the post of my gate. It was thin and colorless, knotted 3 times, with a twig dangling from the center, a twig carved to resemble a cradle. The carving was crude, but the intention was clear. A message, a memory. I left it there. That night, the dream came again, but this time I was beneath the well, not beside it. The figures stood above, their backs still turned. But now, they wept, not with sound, not with movement, only with presence. I could feel the weight of their sorrow pressing downward, through the stone, through the water, into the hollow place where I stood. When I awoke, my pillow was damp, but the window was closed. The basin has grown silent in a new way. It no longer reflects. Its surface is not dark nor light, but simply absent, as though nothing wishes to be seen there anymore. The priest tried to bless it 2 nights ago. His voice cracked on the second line. He has not spoken since. His door remains open, and candles line his floor in spirals now, none of them lit. The willow closest to the boy has begun to split, a slow, widening seam down its center, revealing not rot, but something smoother, paler, not wood, not bone, something between. It pulses slightly when the fog thickens. Some say it is dying, others say it is waking. The boy no longer walks his patterns. He sits now, always the same spot, always the same posture, hands on knees, eyes half-lidded, as if watching a fire that exists only in memory. Children have stopped speaking. Aloud, they play still, but in pantomime. They gesture, smile, sometimes laugh, but no sound emerges. One child, the baker's youngest, opened her mouth last evening, and a small feather drifted out. It dissolved before it reached the ground. She did not cry, only looked at the sky as if expecting a reply. The trees have leaned further. Their branches touch now, interlaced above the hollow like woven fingers in prayer. The canopy no longer breaks even for the moon. And yet the hollow is never dark. A faint glow persists, not from any source, not from any fire, just presence, as though the space remembers being lit once, long ago, and refuses to forget. The boy has begun to hum, softly, not a song, a sound without pitch, without tune. It weaves through the mist like thread pulled through cloth. And when he stops, the silence that follows is louder than wind. Elwyn has taken to marking her steps. Ash from her hearth, drizzled in lines wherever she walks. Not thick, not fearful, just careful, as if making a map in reverse. The markings fade by morning, even if no rain has fallen. Today, I found a stone outside my door, carved with the same spiral I had seen before, but this time it turned outward. At its center, a small indent, shaped like a fingertip. I pressed mine into it, without thinking. The stone warmed briefly, and then the sky changed, only for a moment. A sliver of light moving wrong, not across the horizon, but toward it. A folding, a remembering. And in the hollow, the boy lifted his head. Not all the way, just enough to see something no one else was looking for. Enough to remind the earth that it once held a child it never named. The sky has begun to pale from within. Not lightened, not brightened, but emptied, as if someone far above had drawn breath and not yet let it go. It no longer shifts with dawn or dusk, no longer blushes or grieves. It simply watches. A blank gaze stretched wide above the quiet earth, waiting without hunger. This morning, the dew did not fall. The grass was dry. Not brittle, not dead, just unwilling. I walked barefoot to the edge of the hollow, hoping to feel something through the soles of my feet. The curve of the land still remembered warmth, but only faintly, like a cradle long unoccupied. The boy was there, as always, but something in him had shifted. He no longer sat straight. His shoulders had lowered just slightly, and his head leaned to one side, like a tree bowed by wind it could not name. Around him, the spiral of stones had ceased widening. It had settled into a form now, a single path looping in on itself, coiled like memory too often recalled. And in the center, not beneath him, but near, a bowl, made of clay, darkened by time, laced with cracks like veins. Inside it, ash, pale, fine, almost silver. It was not warm, but I could smell something old in it. Burnt paper, lost names. A new mark had appeared on the basin. No hand had carved it. There were no fresh tools in the village, and no one dares linger there after dusk. But the mark was there, shallow, precise, a curve with 3 prongs, a symbol, perhaps, a warning, or merely something remembered by the stone itself, and now returned. I tried to trace it with my finger, but the air between us pulsed, faintly. Not a push, not a threat, just a suggestion. So I did not. The priest has taken to kneeling outside his own door. He no longer enters his home, though it remains untouched. He faces east, hands in his lap, eyes closed. Not in prayer, not anymore, but in stillness, as if listening for something beneath his ribs. He speaks only in single words now. When I passed yesterday, he whispered, "Fold." Today, hollow. No one asks what he means. The willow that had split has not mended, nor has it fallen. The tear widens gently each night, and within it, the pale inner wood now gleams faintly in the dark. There is something written there, not in letters, but in shape. The way the grain twists, the way the light nestles in certain grooves. I tried to sketch it once, but the lines never settled. They changed beneath my pencil. Or perhaps I remembered them wrong. Or perhaps I was never meant to. A thread of water now runs through the center of the hollow, not fed by stream or rain. It appeared 3 days past, winding quietly through the grass, like something that had been beneath the soil all along and only now remembered how to rise. It is clear, silent, and too cold to touch. Where it flows, the ground turns pale. Where it pools, the insects fall still. The children have begun to braid their hair with threads of bark. No one told them to. They do not explain. But each morning they arrive at the edge of the willow ring, kneel, and place a small object, a feather, a shell, a seed pod, into the shallow run of water. They do not stay long, but they always leave in silence, glancing backward once before disappearing between the trees. Last night, the dream came again. This time, I was beneath the village. There was no soil, only dust and bone, and a staircase made of steps that bent in unnatural rhythm, some wide, some narrow, some not steps at all. I descended without feeling the motion. My body was not mine. At the base of the stair, a corridor lined with mirrors that showed not my face, but moments I had not lived. A boy's hand reaching for a cradle made of light. A woman folding a note into a wound on a tree. A bell tied with twine, swinging underwater. When I turned, I was holding something. A single willow leaf, curled into the shape of a mouth. When I placed it on the ground, it sang. The sound was not music. It was a long exhale, filled with absence, a name forgotten too early. When I woke, there was a line of ash beneath my window, straight, unbroken. At its center, a feather, folded. The animals no longer leave tracks, even in mud, even in snow. They pass through without trace, as if belonging more to the fog than the earth. Their eyes are different now, glassy, expectant. They pause often, stare at the boy, not with curiosity, but with memory, as if they knew him before they became what they are. And still he waits. He has not aged. He has not moved more than a few paces since the frost began to linger. But something around him has deepened. The air near his shoulders bends faintly, like heat on stone. Though the cold is sharp enough now to crack wood left outside, he holds something in his lap, always covered. A bundle of cloth tied at the corners, No one has seen beneath it, but when the wind passes, it whistles slightly, not through the trees, but through the bundle, as if something hollow sleeps inside, or something once full. The wind itself has changed. It no longer moves. It arrives, a presence soft as shadow, thick as old sleep. It does not rattle windows. It does not stir branches. It simply occupies, and when it leaves, it takes sound with it. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of eyes. Elwyn has gone blind. It happened quietly. She did not speak of it, only began tracing lines with her fingers across her walls, circles, spirals, a single mark shaped like a flame turned inward. She hums now, a soft repetition, like someone reciting a lullaby they were never sung. The boy hums with her, though he is too far to hear. Their melodies match. This morning, a single stone had been placed on every doorstep, smooth, white, cold. Each bore the same symbol. The spiral that once curled inward now stretched outward, elongated into a path with no end. When I lifted mine, the ground beneath was warm, and in the distance, somewhere beyond the willow ring, I heard something breathe. Not an animal, not a person, just breathe. Returned. The bells have not rung for 3 winters now. Their towers remain tall and sun-bleached, but the ropes have frayed into silence. No wind stirs them, no hand dares. In the stillness between dawn and day, the bell mouths hang open like forgotten prayers, not waiting to be answered, only waiting to be believed again. The fog no longer lifts. It coils now, thick in the lower fields, knotted in corners of thatched eaves, clinging to the folds of cloaks left too near the threshold. A permanent hush, not unlike breath held behind lips that have long since stopped speaking. Even the hearth smoke refuses to rise, folding into itself and vanishing beneath the eaves. The boy has not moved since the willow opened its hollow. Each morning, he sits before it, his bundle cradled still in his lap. The cloth has begun to fade. What was once crimson now flickers between rust and dusk shadow, like a wound forgetting its color. The shape beneath it has not changed. Small, quiet, exact. The water thread through the hollow has grown thinner. Where once it wound in slow loops around stone and reed, it now drifts as a single line, barely visible, barely real. It no longer feeds the moss. The moss has gone pale, brittle to the touch, flaking away in soft spirals like a language unlearned. The stones that border its path remain warm, long after the cold has set in. No one steps over them. Yesterday, a mirror cracked in the baker's home. No one touched it. There had been no tremor. It split from the center outward, clean and slow, as if a thought had passed through it too sharply. Behind the crack, for a moment, something shimmered. Not a reflection, but an absence shaped like one. The baker did not replace it. She hung cloth over the frame and tied 3 knots in the corner, then placed a slice of bread beneath it. By morning, the cloth was damp, and the bread had vanished. The priest now sleeps standing, his hands folded across his chest, his chin tucked low. He leans against the frame of the temple's east window, which has not opened in weeks. The candle at his feet burns always, though no one lights it. Its flame wavers only when the boy hums, and the boy has begun humming more often. Long, gentle chords, not song, not chant, just breath passed through memory. Sometimes he hums with his eyes open, sometimes closed, but always as though he is listening for something underneath the sound itself, something deeper than pitch, older than music. Today, I found a braid of my own hair tied around the latch of my door. I had not cut it. I had not touched it. Yet the length matched mine exactly. Same curl, same silvered strands woven through the dark. It was tied with a strand of willow root, still damp, still fragrant. A gift, perhaps, or a reminder. I burned it, not out of fear, but because some things, once given, must not be kept. That night, I dreamed of the sky. It was not above me. It was beneath my feet, a field of stars spread wide across the earth, shifting with each step. I walked slowly, barefoot, leaving no prints. Ahead, the boy stood, holding the bundle now unwrapped. What lay in the cloth was not a child, nor a body, nor anything I recognized, just a shape, software, heavy with waiting. He did not look at me. He placed the shape into the sky floor, and it sank without a ripple. When I woke, my floorboards creaked, as though remembering footsteps I hadn't taken. The children now sleep outside, not far, just at the edge of the village, where the fields meet the ash trees. They do not build fires. They do not speak. Each one carries a small bundle tied in cloth. No one asks what's inside. No one interrupts their ritual. Each night, before sleep, they gather in a circle and press their palms into the soil. At first light, they return, pale-eyed, silent, steady. Their parents do not ask where they've been. In the hollow, the split willow has begun to pulse, not with light, not with blood, but with time. The crack widens minutely each day, though no sound escapes. It glows faintly before dusk, not visible, not seen, but felt in the bones, like a word spoken too close to the chest. The boy no longer watches it. He faces, away now, toward the field where no birds fly. The birds have gone elsewhere, not fled, only stopped returning. Their nests hang untouched. No eggs rot within. They simply do not come. The sky is quieter for it. The silence has thickened. It no longer needs distance to echo. Elwyn no longer leaves her home. Her door remains open, but she does not cross the threshold. She sits within the frame, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the ground. Her lips move constantly, but make no sound. She weaves now. Nothing elaborate, nothing useful. Just long knotted cords from bark fiber and thread. She hangs them in loops across her ceiling. They sway when there is no wind. I asked her once what they were for. She paused, touched the ground, and said, "To tie the remembering to the bones." She did not explain further. Today, the wind arrived again, not as movement, not as change, just as presence. It filled the space between the trees, coiling around the stones like a breath held too close. It smelled of bark and night and milk gone bitter. The boy stood as it came, first time in days. He placed the bundle beside him and raised both hands to the sky, not high, not pleading, just open. The willow bent lower, the thread of water stilled, the humming stopped, and then I heard it, a second voice, not human, not beast, not echo, a voice with no speaker, rising from the hollow like a name no one should hear and everyone already knows. It lasted only a moment, but in that moment, I knew something had turned. Not begun, not ended, just turned. Like a page too long stuck together, like a dream that remembers it has been dreamt before. The boy sat again. The cloth remained empty beside him, and the spiral of stones began, slowly, to unwind. The earth has begun to forget its own shape. Lines once familiar, ridge lines, footpaths, the gentle curve of the well's stone lip, now shift in quiet increments, no longer fixed but drifting, like the memory of a name spoken too often in the wrong tone. Steps taken with certainty, return the walker elsewhere. Gates do not close the same way twice. Even the trees lean differently now, as if the soil beneath them is folding. The boy no longer sits within his spirals. He stands just outside them, one hand resting lightly on a new shape that has risen from the ground. A stone, rough and smooth in alternating patches, tall as his shoulder. It was not there the day before, nor the day before that, yet moss already clings to its base, and 3 white threads are tied around its crown, each knotted in the same silent rhythm the children use when braiding the bark. The cloth he once held has vanished. In its place, a ring of grass, carefully woven, now browned at the edges from some private weather. It sits at his feet, untouched. The wind avoids it. So do insects, and light. The air bends gently around its curve, like something unseen shielding it from being known too quickly. Today, the fog arrived, early though no sun had yet risen. It pooled at the roots of the shrines, low and dense, with weight rather than motion. The basin filled with it, a low shroud in the shape of memory. Elwyn stood over it, one palm above the surface, eyes still closed. She no longer speaks, not even in whispers, but her breath changes with the fog, shallower, slow, as if each inhalation must pass through something older before it reaches her lungs. I have not dreamed in 3 nights. It is not sleep that evades me. I sleep as one does in winter, long, blank, beneath the blanket of something more than dark. But no images come, no sound, no faces, only the sense of being watched from inside the spine, as if something within me remembers more than it should and dares not show me yet. The priest has begun walking backward. He moves through the village with his arms at his sides, eyes half-lidded, never looking where he goes, never stumbling. Where he walks, the frost lifts. Where he stands, the ground sinks. This morning, he paused in the center of the square, knelt, and placed a piece of cloth into the soil. Then he folded his hands and closed his eyes. No one moved until he rose. The children have woven new loops from reeds and thistle. They hang them from doorways, from the bones of trees, from the hollows of broken tools left leaning against sheds. Each loop contains a single object, a tooth, a thread, a bead of red glass that no one in the village recalls owning. They are not charms, they are not signs. They are moments strung like lanterns across a path no one dares follow. The stream has vanished. Where once water curled in soft lines through the hollow, now there is only a shallow groove, dry and dusted with something that looks like ash but smells faintly of rain. A cracked bowl sits where the stream once ended. Inside it, a knot of black hair wrapped around a pebble, tied with a ribbon of bark flesh. It pulses slightly when the fog thickens. The boy's shadow now bends the wrong way. It does not fall with the sun, nor stretch with the moon. It leans only toward the stone beside him, touching it always, never wavering. And sometimes, just before the stars arrive, it seems to lift slightly from the ground, like cloth hung between breath and belief. I found a mark on my wall this morning, thin, curved, drawn not in ink or ash, but in pressure, as though something had leaned against the wood and left a memory of its shape. A curve, 3 lines, familiar. I traced it with my finger, and for a moment my skin stung. Not pain, recognition. I could not recall where I'd felt it before. The village walks slower now. Every task takes longer. Each gesture is considered. The market is no longer spoken of as a place, but a time, after the bell or before the water moved. There is no bell. There is no water. But the words remain, brittle and reliable, like dried petals pressed between forgotten pages. Elwyn has begun drawing circles again. Not in dust, nor in ink, in breath. Her window clouds in the shape of spirals each time she exhales. Always the same size, always the same direction. She does not notice, or if she does, she no longer responds. Her eyes remain open even when she sleeps, pale, still, like mirrors that have seen something too clearly. The birds have not returned, but feathers appear, laid carefully in places where no foot has stepped, beneath chairs, on window sills, beneath the tongue of the baker's youngest child. The feathers are soft, always damp, and tinged with the faint scent of salt. When touched, they hum, faintly, like a bell not struck, only remembered. A tree near the temple has shed its bark, cleanly, in a single sheet. The bark hangs from its own trunk like a cloak undone. Beneath it, the wood gleams, not white, not grey, but something between. Carved into it, not symbols, not letters, but folds, as if the tree had been folded inward, like paper around a secret. A child placed a stone inside the folds this morning. It has not fallen. The boy has closed his eyes, not in sleep, not in weariness, but in patience. His arms remain at his sides, his feet bare against the pale soil. The stone beside him now bears a second thread, not white, but coppery, like dried blood spun into wire. It hangs loose, unknotted. The air around it tastes of smoke no fire has made, and behind him, the trees lean farther, so far that the sky above the hollow has become a tunnel, a mouth, not of earth, not of root, but of something unspoken, something listening. Tonight, I placed a cup of water beside my door, not to drink, not to bless, only to mark the hour. By morning, it was empty. The cup remained dry, and beside it, a stone, carved not with symbols, but with silence. The sky has begun to thrum, not with thunder nor with storm, but with something lower, something folded beneath the light, humming like breath caught between teeth. It is not sound, not truly, but a feeling, like the vibration of a name spoken aloud in a room no one dares enter. At night, the stars no longer flicker. They hold instead, fixed, distant, unmoving, as though peering downward or reflecting something unseen from below. One has vanished. It went without flare, without warning, just absence, and where it once hung, the dark has thickened, not black, but velvet, laced with threads of color no eye remembers. The boy no longer watches the willow. He stands beside it still, but his gaze is angled downward now, toward the ring of earth that has softened beneath his feet. The grass does not grow there, nor does it rot. It simply yields, sinking slightly each day, as if remembering how to become hollow again. The stone at his side has cracked, a clean split running from crown to root. No sound marked the fracture, only stillness, and with it, something changed. The shadow no longer follows him. It has anchored itself to the stone, frozen mid-gesture, bent across the spiral path, reaching outward as though to touch what cannot be held. The boy has not looked at it, but once, when the wind passed through the hollow, it lifted just slightly, as if it had never been tethered to light at all. The children have begun to hum again, in unison now, just after dusk. They gather at the tree that shed its bark, and they press their foreheads to its pale trunk. Their hum is breathless, low, the shape of sound rather than the sound itself. One hums in a higher tone, weaving it through the others. She does not open her eyes. When they leave, They do so in silence, each trailing a ribbon of ash tied to their wrist. The ash does not mark their skin. It hovers slightly, like smoke trapped in thread, shifting with each motion but never smearing. One child held his wrist near the basin, and the ash glowed, not brightly, not warm, but visibly. A dull shimmer, like heat seen through fog. The glow faded with the light. The basin itself has grown shallower, not in depth, but in presence. When approached, it no longer reflects, not even void. It simply blurs, as though the eye cannot hold it. Once, it caught a leaf that fell from the priest's shoulder. The leaf sank slowly, but did not ripple. By morning, it was gone. The priest now walks only at dawn. He traces the same circle each day, 12 steps outward, 12 steps in. At the center of the loop, he leaves a single offering. Today, it was a bowl of salt wrapped in netted reed. Yesterday, a cloth embroidered with 7 concentric spirals. Tomorrow, perhaps nothing, or something already forgotten. He has begun to speak again. Only one word, repeated. Carry. Elwyn has taken to writing on her walls, not in ink or soot, but in pressed threads of grass. She flattens them with her palms, binds them with bark fiber, arranges them in weavings that resemble neither letter nor pattern. Some believe they are maps, others echoes. Once, I stood long enough to see the shapes move, slowly, as if turning in a wind that did not reach the room. She does not eat now, but she drinks. Water drawn not from the well, which has dried into stone, but from small bowls placed in hidden hollows. The water is clear, cold, sweet with the taste of something buried. I do not know who places them. Last night, I woke to a sound I could not place, not inside the house, not outside. It existed just behind my breath, a kind of whisper that spoke in memory, not in tone. It repeated once, then faded. But when I rose, the candle beside my bed was lit. I had not touched it in days. The flame flickered sideways, not in fear nor in draught, but as though drawn toward the hill behind the hollow, where nothing has grown since the first snowfall. There, a single figure stood, not moving, not calling, only facing downward, not toward me, toward the soil. In the morning, there were footprints, bare, small. They began at the edge of the field and ended at the base of the hill. Where they stopped, a single feather had been placed, curled, blue-grey, rimmed with frost. I left it untouched, but I watched the sun move around it all day. It never cast a shadow. The spiral path in the hollow has begun to fade. Its stones sink gently now, swallowed into earth like teeth into loam. The boy does not notice, or he does, and accepts. He has taken to whispering at dusk, not to the trees, not to the stone, but to the wind. His mouth forms shapes I cannot read, but once, as I passed through the ash ring, I caught a fragment, a word I do not know, but it felt like grief made soft. The sky at twilight is different now. It curls inward at the edges, softening its corners, as if remembering it was once not sky at all. The clouds do not gather, they settle, low and still and barely seen. Birds no longer fly above them, but sometimes, high above, something moves, not fast, not large, but steady, like a memory returning from the wrong direction. The people speak less now, not in fear nor in fatigue, but in preparation. Words are chosen, not offered. Greetings feel like partings. Farewells are spoken like oaths. A woman passed me today and said only, "Soon." I did not ask what. I did not need to. There is a sense now that the earth itself has leaned, not tilted, not shifted, leaned, as though pressing its weight against something unseen or someone. And still the boy waits. He is smaller now, or the world is taller. His eyes hold more sky than face. His hands no longer tremble. They open at his sides like leaves learning to fall. Beside him, the cracked stone breathes. Once each night, a single exhale, felt, not heard. And in that breath, the mist thickens. And in that thickening, we listen. Not for answers, only for the next sound the silence dares to make. The ground has begun to sigh beneath our feet, not with sound, but with give. A soft, measured loosening, as though the soil no longer wishes to hold weight. Stones shift without falling. Paths soften into suggestion. The village, once etched into the hill's memory, like a name into bark, has grown blurred at the edges. Chimneys lean where they stood straight. Steps creak that were once firm. Walls seem further apart at dusk than they were by dawn. No one speaks of it. They adjust their hands, their gait, the rhythm of their breath. And when they dream, if they dream of roots. The boy no longer remains in the hollow. He moves now, slowly, along the ridges of the field, where nothing has grown since the first unseasonal frost. His path leaves no mark. Not even dew will follow. But where he passes, the birds do not sing. The air thickens. Threads of cobweb stretch low between brambles, though no spiders are ever seen. His hands remain open, cupped slightly, as if to carry something invisible and light. His face is unreadable, not blank, not distant, but listening, always listening, as though hearing a memory too large to fit inside his skin. The willow has bent nearly to the ground. Its trunk groans when the wind passes, not in protest, but in rhythm. The split has widened just enough to reveal the hollow within, a narrow space lined with moss that does not grow elsewhere. The moss glows faintly in the late hours, not with brightness, but with recollection, like breath exhaled by stone. No one enters, but someone leaves stones there. Each morning, one more, smooth, egg-shaped, warm to the touch, placed gently just within the split, as though fed into a mouth that does not eat. The priest no longer approaches the hollow. He remains in the field, walking circles with his head bowed, whispering numbers in a language that is not his own. Last night, the moon did not rise. The sky remained clear, the stars still bright, fixed in their unfamiliar stillness. But the moon did not come. Its absence felt not as loss, but as hush, like the silence left behind when a long-kept candle finally burns out and no one replaces it. In its place, a different light hovered, not in the sky, not above, but low and behind things, in doorways, in the seam of hills, behind the eyes of those who looked too long toward the basin. A light that did not shine, only held, heavy, pale, not quite gold. The basin itself is gone now, not emptied, not dried, gone. Where it stood, the ground has sunk, a shallow depression lined in a ring of smooth featherbones, too small for bird, too fine for beast. In its center, the soil glimmers like ash layered over mirror. Nothing reflects, but when one stands too long above it, their shadow does not align. The villagers have begun wearing veils, woven from linen or dust or memory, depending on who speaks of them. Not to hide, not to mourn, but to soften. Faces now move like water beneath fabric, indistinct and slow. Children speak only with their hands, tracing circles into each other's palms before parting. Their gestures linger in the air, like smoke unable to rise. Elwyn no longer opens her eyes. She walks without them now, trailing her hands along stone and wood and thread. Her home is filled with coils, long ropes of knotted cloth, each one wrapped in patterns only she understands. When the wind moves through the eaves, they hum, not in tone, but in weight, as though tuned to the bones of the house itself. She has begun singing again, very faint, at dusk, a melody with no beginning, no end, just the rise and fall of something that once was lullaby, long ago, before language divided itself into right and wrong. The boy listens from afar. He does not echo it, but once I saw his lips move with the rhythm of her breath. I found a mark beneath my bed today, pressed into the wood, a perfect ring, as if from a bowl left too long. But no bowl has ever sat there. Inside the ring, 4 white threads twisted together, tied in a loop, pinned at the center with a needle of thorn. When I touched it, the floor cooled. The wind has changed direction. It no longer moves westward with the fall of light. It circles now, spiraling softly through the trees, brushing the village in widening loops. It carries a scent I cannot place, dry, sweet, like crushed leaves kept too long in a sealed box. And beneath it, a second smell, fainter still, smoke, but not fire. The smoke of pages burned before they were written. The field beyond the hollow has begun to glow, not visibly, not in light, but in presence. When one stands near it, their spine tightens, then softens. Their hands feel too full. Their breath deepens. There are stones there now, new ones, pale and tall, without mark, arranged in no clear pattern. But when the fog thickens, they hum, a low, steady note, like glass waiting to break. The boy walks among them in the early hours. Only then, at first light, he returns to the willow and places his palms on either side of the hollow. The tree does not respond, but the earth nearby darkens slightly, as if soaking in what cannot be spoken. Someone has begun marking time with bells again, not rung, never rung, but set along the paths in clusters of 3, small, rusted, still, hung from strings that fray in loops never straight. The bells are always cold, but if one listens very closely, their silence is not empty. Inside each, the air carries a shape, a held breath, a paused vowel. Yesterday, I heard my name spoken from behind the stone, not aloud, not in voice, but in sense. I turned, expecting no one. I was right, but the stone had warmed, and beside it, a figure had knelt. Not the boy, not Elwyn, not the priest, just a shape, cloth-draped, motionless. Its hands rested open, cradling nothing. I blinked. It was gone. But in its place, a shallow bowl, carved with 12 spirals. One of them was still turning, not spinning, turning, like a thought reconsidered. Tonight, I sleep beneath no roof. I have placed a stone beside my pillow, wrapped in bark, tied in 3 knots. Above me, the stars do not move, and somewhere beneath the roots, something very old has begun to breathe in again, quietly, softly, as if preparing to remember its name. The night no longer falls. It leans, as though pressed gently into the shape of the land. It arrives not with darkness, but with hush, a silence so patient, it feels like breath buried beneath the soil. There is no boundary now between dusk and dawn. Time folds like damp cloth, and the village moves through it, as one might move through fog, slowly, cautiously, without asking where it ends. The boy stands always. He no longer walks, no longer shifts. His body remains at the edge of the field, beside the cracked stone whose split no longer grows. The spiral path has vanished beneath lichen and soft dust, yet he faces the center of where it once curved. Not in mourning, not in need, but in a stillness so complete, it resembles waiting after memory. The willow has touched the ground. Its crown now rests fully upon the earth, as if kneeling, not in prayer, but in offering. Moss has grown across the seam in its trunk, sealing the hollow from view. No one touches it, yet small offerings continue to appear there. Bits of thread, milk teeth, broken buttons, locks of hair tied in bundles with reed. None are removed, none are disturbed. The earth around it hums. Not always, only when no one is watching, and only when something important is about to be remembered. The children have grown quieter. Their games have stopped, but they still gather, kneeling in rows at the base of the shrine ruins, their eyes closed, their hands flat against the stone. They do not speak, they do not sway. But when they rise again, each carries something in their palm, a small, perfect circle of ash. Some press it to their foreheads, others bury it. One child let hers go into the wind. It did not fall. This morning, I found a thread tied around my ring finger. It was thin, nearly invisible, but strong. It wound 3 times and ended with a knot I could not untie. I do not remember placing it there. I do not know who did. But when I tried to cut it, my knife turned dull. When I tried to burn it, the flame went out, so I kept it. And now, the wind passes more gently over my hands. The priest is no longer seen. Only his candles remain, burning in soft clusters near the temple steps. They do not melt. Their flames do not flicker. The stones around them are warm. Each morning, a new candle appears, never placed, never found in the hand of anyone, but always lit, always waiting. Elwyn sings now in the old tongue, a tongue no one alive remembers teaching. The words are water-shaped, vowel-heavy, and slow. I cannot follow them, but I know what they mean. Each note drapes across the doorways like a woven smoke. At night, when I press my ear to the floorboards, I can hear her voice as though it comes not from across the village, but from beneath it. And with her voice comes the soft sound of shifting stone, not falling, not rising, adjusting. The fields have begun to move, barely, but enough. Stones once marking borders now drift inward. Paths that led to wells now end in pools of dry moss. One barn collapsed without sound last week. The animals were found kneeling in the grass beside it, heads bowed, hooves folded. Not afraid, not hurt, just quiet. The wind brings things now, not objects, but textures. A smell like pressed linen, a pressure behind the teeth. The taste of bitter herbs once ground for memory. It comes in pulses, wrapped around the distant tolling of something that does not chime but insists, low, hollow, like a bell buried too deep to rise. The boy has closed his eyes, only at night. But each time he does, the stars above shift. Slowly, subtly. Some vanish. Some reappear in places where no one recalls them being. The constellations no longer connect. They scatter, like seeds disturbed, or bones. He does not sleep, but his breath has deepened. This morning, he opened his hands, and there, between his palms, rested a shape made of shadow and dust. It was not visible, but it could be seen, like a thought, like something once buried in childhood and now returned. He did not speak, but the trees leaned closer, as if listening, as if answering. The cracked stone beside him has begun to glow beneath the moss, not bright, not alive, but pulsing in time with the stillness of the ground. A rhythm that does not beat, only waits. The glow is palest amber, and sometimes it reveals markings not seen before, rings within rings, interrupted by a single line that bends instead of breaking. I have begun to dream again. Last night, I stood in a great hall with no roof and no walls, only columns of wind and vines. The floor was water. The ceiling was folded linen. The boy stood before me, his face unchanged. But in his hands was a cradle, made of breath, made of grief. He did not offer it, he only showed it. And as I looked inside, I saw not a child, not a thing, not a truth. I saw myself, but not as I am, as I might have been, before I forgot. I woke with my hands clasped to my chest. The wind had turned again. Now it moves in gentle spirals around the center of the village, never touching, never lifting, only circling. It leaves behind patterns in the dust that cannot be swept. Some resemble script, others resemble sleep. The animals have left. Without sound, without tracks. The fields are empty, but the grass has not grown back. Only hollows remain where they once rested. One farmer marked the places with small stones. Within a week, moss grew on each, in a single line, like vertebrae, like memory. And tonight, as I write these words with candlelight drawn long across the table, I hear something soft begin to rise, not from the hollow, not from the trees, from within the ground itself, a breath, long, ancient, returning, and in the breath, a voice, not a word, not yet, but the shape of one, ready to be spoken. ChatGPT said, "The light did not rise this morning. It spread, not across the sky, but through the soil, a pale warmth drifting upward, not golden, not white, but the color of breath remembered after grief. It did not touch our faces. It touched our shadows, lengthened them, softened them, pulled them inward, like strings returning to a single spool." The boy stood at the center of the field, where the spirals had once been. There are no lines there now, no stones, no markers, only the memory of a pattern that had been walked enough times to alter the earth's dreaming. He stood barefoot, arms slightly apart, palms open to the soil. His eyes were not closed, but they no longer saw the sky. They saw beneath it. The willow has finished its descent. Its branches now nestle flat against the ground, forming a low cradle of green-veined wood. The trunk has twisted inward, sealing the hollow. The seam vanished. It is no longer a tree. Not exactly. More a vessel, a shell, a tomb for something that was never buried because it had never been held. Today, no birds sang, not because they were gone, but because they were listening. A murmur runs through the roots of everything now, through the stones, the hearths, the knots in the beams. A hum not felt in the ear but in the spine. It folds through us slowly, like a name rising unbidden at the end of a long forgetting. Elwyn no longer sings. She sits at the foot of the shrine with her hands cupped gently in her lap, as if waiting for something to be placed there. Her head tilts slightly toward the west, where the trees have bent in a final arc, forming a slow, solemn tunnel of branch and bark. Light does not pass through it, only quiet does. I stood before the tunnel this morning. Its shape reminded me of a mouth, not one that speaks, but one that weeps without sound. There were no footsteps within, but the air was warm, like it had recently been held. I stepped close and smelled cedar and milk and ash. The wind circled behind me and whispered, not a word, just the shape of one. The villagers have gathered, not by summons, nor by ritual, but by instinct. One by one, we stood at the edge of the field, our veils drawn low, our fingers laced. The children knelt, eyes open, as though seeing the surface of a still lake that reflected only what had been taken. The priest returned. He came from beneath the earth, not from a hole, not from a door, but from the space where the temple once cast a shadow. He bore nothing in his hands but both palms were black with soot and moss. His eyes were grey now, not dull, not empty, just finished. He walked to the centre of the field. The boy did not turn, but the light thickened, and we remembered, not with thoughts, but with bones. There was once a name, given before breath. It was meant to be spoken only once. At the birth of the first forgotten, a child born not from a womb, but from absence, a shape shaped only by the ache it left behind. The child was not evil nor cursed, only unnamed, and the world, unable to hold an unnamed thing, let it drift, not into death, but into waiting. We remembered now, in the quiet, the ring of moss behind the granary, the circles drawn in breath, the soundless bell in the grove, the crack in the stone, the empty cloth, the bowls, the feathers, all were pieces, not warnings, reminders that something had been left behind and had waited too long. The boy's shadow no longer moved. It lifted gently and began to stretch, upward, not outward. Its shape trembled, unfolded, bent like a spine returning to its beginning. And from within it rose a second figure, not larger, not brighter, just more complete, as though all the waiting had been to reassemble what the world had broken through its forgetting. The figure turned to us, and we did not look away. It had no eyes, only light, arranged softly across its face, a cradle of stars where the mouth should have been. And in that light, we saw what had been lost, the names of those we never held, the hands we never reached, the grief we carried quietly for those who were never given permission to be real. And we wept, not aloud, not outwardly. We wept into our spines, into our teeth, into the stories that will never be told again. The figure raised its hand and pointed downward to the soil, and we understood. There are no graves for those who were never given names, only spirals, only stones, only silence. But silence too can become cradle, can become altar, can become the breath returned to what was waiting. The wind sighed once, the roots deepened, the field pulsed with one long breath, and the figure folded back into the boy, not into his body, into his absence. The light dimmed, the sky lowered, and somewhere beneath all things, something old said yes, not in speech, in memory. The boy sat once more, his hands empty, the stone sealed, the willow closed, and the earth at last stopped waiting, not healed, not undone, only complete. A wound does not vanish when named, but it stops growing. We returned to our homes, each step lighter, though none of us had been unburdened. The shadows now bend toward the cradle, and the air smells of cedar and salt and old cloth. I lit a candle that night and watched its flame dance the shape of a name I never knew how to say. Now I do, but I will not speak it. It belongs to the earth now, to the breath beneath the breath, to the silence that waited longer than sorrow. And in the dark, the trees sleep facing inward, as if listening still, just in case. One day, someone forgets again.